Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
We're so pleased to have on singer, songwriter, pianist, producer, and also podcast host. We have Tony Mantor. Tony, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, I feel like I know you already from your podcasts and everything, but you know, your music background is so deep here in Nashville also since you moved here.
Yes.
You know, back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
But I've got to ask you about with this new podcast that you're doing, Why Not Me, the World. How did this come to be, and how did you end up with the focus on autism?
During the pandemic, everything shut down, so
Right.
all the concerts I was working on, all the productions just stopped.
Yeah.
So I decided to go back and just have some fun with music and recorded that CD. And then this song, Why Not Me, came to me, and I had recorded a song from this songwriter on an artist I'd worked with a few years ago, and I said, man, this song is me. It's about never giving up on your dreams.
Right.
You're never too old to do it if you've got that mountain, climb it. So I told him, I said, look, you know, it's not going to be anything but a fun project, but I'm going to record it if you don't mind. And it just blew up from there.
Wow. How incredible. And then why did the focus become on autism? Because it's kind of a unique angle, and I know that, you know, with your podcast, and I'm gonna have to brag on you, to where it's in like the top 1% of podcasts already.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a pretty full gambit of podcasts out there for people to listen to.
Yeah.
But your niche is really autism, and even, you know, in this past September on suicide prevention.
Yeah, how it happened is I recorded the song and I put a steel in it for texture, kind of like the Eagles did.
Yeah.
And all my promoters from New York, Nashville, LA, London, they heard it and they said, oh, a great country song. And I'm going, it's not country, but perception is reality. That's so they wanted to put it out to radio, and I let them. And in doing it, I felt I needed to do something to pay tribute to somebody. Right. So I did our first responders. I did a video on that. And I called a couple of friends of mine that I knew, and I said, man, can you get me a few shots of first responders doing their thing? Yeah. And before too long, I got pictures and short video clips from people all over the country.
How amazing.
So I put that together, and it went like any project has a shelf life.
Right.
You know, so I figured 6-7 months would be over, and it was about that time. And then a couple of months later, I get this call from this lady, and she goes, I really love your song. I love what you did. I'm a speech therapist for autistic children. Can you do that for us?
Wow.
And I told her, I said, you know, I don't know if I'm the person for you. I don't have anybody in my family that's autistic. I don't know anything about autism. I do know one of my friends has an autistic nephew, but he never talks about it. So I don't know if I'd be the one for you. So long story short, I met with a lot of her people that she knew, and they talked me into doing it. And then I decided to start it out. Let's just do, re-record it, the more adult contemporary version, and let's do a video on it. So I got, I did a remix, and I call it Why Not Me, Nashville. Wow. And I got all the people that joined me in that was either autistic or special needs.
How incredible, Tony.
Yeah, and it just
That's powerful.
It is, and it blew up from there.
Amazing. Well, you know, and once again, too, I got to brag on you. You know, you've gotten awards for your label, you know, Plateau Music. You've also gotten awards as a producer. Why delve in? I mean, you know, you're a classically trained pianist. I mean, you know, once again, you've toured with Ronnie McDowell. And so why a podcast now? Why did you feel drawn to jumping into this whole realm of podcasting?
Well, when the video came out, and it's been a year now, last year the video came out, I started getting calls from people, and they asked me, can you do this help us out? And then I got this chance to do a co-host on a podcast, and it was a business podcast. And so in it, I got a chance to talk about my music. I got a chance to talk about what I was doing here in Nashville production-wise. And I also talked about my video on autism. So I had a seven-show contract with them, and then they wanted me to do another one for 10 weeks, and I said, no, I don't think so. And I felt that if I'm going to do something like this, I need to do my own.
Right.
So I started doing my research on how do you do this, how do you put it together, and because I'd never done a podcast, I didn't know anything about it, you know, and so I finally, and I figured that it would only last me, you know, just do a few months of it and call it good, and so I was going to do like 2 shows a month, and so I did my introductory one May 19th, and within a month, I mean, it just started getting all kinds of feedback, and people were sending me stuff, you know, we love it and all this. And I did my first episode June 28th, and then I had 2 episodes in July, and then I had so many people that called me, I turned it into a weekly podcast in August.
Incredible. And,
Yeah.
and how do you find your guest?
They find me. You know, I mean, because I've got people that tell people about me, and I've got this lady. Actually, episode 1, she's a artist and a poet out of London.
Oh, wow.
And she is so inspirational. She gets out there and she just does a lot of things, and she's told people about me. She just connected me with a person from Israel yesterday. You know, so it's just that dynamic that's just creating it to grow.
How powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and I've got to bring this up too, to where, you know, your new music came out. You know, it's out, you know, in September and everything already. You're going to have music videos from that. But you released it now, Why Not Me, the way you wanted to originally, without the steel guitar in, right?
Yes. Yeah. I put the adult contemporary version on that, so they can get it. They can still hear it through the video, or it's up on iTunes as well. But yeah, so there's 2 versions of it up there.
You know, and I've got to bring this up too, to where our viewers may not know you, Tony, as well as I do. But, you know, you started out your career in Maine.
Right.
You know, classically trained, you know, you started writing songs at a very young age.
Yeah.
And then, you know, going back and forth to Nashville until you finally moved here in what, 1993?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's and this year here is my 30th year in Nashville.
Amazing. Well, and I've got to bring up too, we were talking before we started the interview, some of the great artists that you've worked with as a producer and done incredible things with, like Debbie Campbell, Glenn Campbell's daughter.
Yes. Yeah, she's great. We've released a couple of songs with her over in the UK, and they just love her over there. Later this fall, I'm going to release another one, and this song that we're going to release is it's called "It Looks Like Rain." And it is one of the most lyrically visual songs that I've ever heard.
Wow.
And it's about Alzheimer's, you know, and you can picture every line, and in it, with her singing it, because her fans and everything is going to picture she's thinking about Glenn.
Right.
And so I'm visualizing people are going to be able to hear this song and put their minds in a position of where they're thinking about Glenn Campbell.
Well, you know, and there's other artists that you've worked with also, I mean, and you yourself have achieved, you know, songs on the charts with your own songwriting.
Yeah.
And so the producer, you know, Plateau Music is like your day job.
Yes.
And then you've got this great podcast going on that's taken on its own life. And then it seems like certain artists are drawn to you also, you know, when you moved here to Nashville and to make your way in the music business, it seems like everything's still evolving for you, Tony.
It is, you know, I always tell people, always do your best work, because you never know who's watching you. And then the second part of that is you never know who's around the next corner to help you or to be part of your career. And I've been very fortunate. I mean, I've worked with Mila Mason, you know, because Debbie Campbell. I'm working with Donnie Most of Happy Days now.
I was going to bring that up. How incredible is that with Donnie? And Donnie's got a great voice and a great entertainer.
Oh, he is. And you know, the cool part about it is I mean, I grew up watching Happy Days.
Me too.
And it's like to have Ralph Malph in my studio, you know, saying, "Oh, damn," you know, or whatever. I'm going, "Whoa, Ralph," you know, and it's not Ralph, it's Donnie. You know,
right.
It's kind of cool.
That is amazing. Well, and also with Bobby that you worked with.
Yes, Jackie Wilson's son, Bobby.
Yeah, Jackie Wilson, what a talent.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that there led me into working and dealing with a lot of Motown people. I mean, I had so many Motown people call me to tell me, you know, their stories about them with Jackie, or hey, we need to do a project. I had people calling me that I listened to growing up, say, we got to do a project together. You know, and
that has to, I mean, At that point, you know, being the young musician out of Maine, do you feel like you need to pinch yourself at that point?
Yeah. I mean, if you remember Lenny Welch.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he called me up one day. He goes, my cousin lives in Nashville. I think I'm going to come out and see you. He spent a whole week with me in my studio telling me stories about Jackie and different things. And then I wound up taking him to the Grand Ole Opry that night, and Vince was there. And so after the show was over, we got Vince Gill, Lenny Welch, me, and a couple other people standing outside in the back of the Grand Ole Opry, just telling stories.
How amazing!
Yeah.
Well, and I got to bring this up too. You were also featured in the documentary that came out in 2006, right?
Yes. Yes. It was a documentary about session players and how they work with producers and everything.
Which I think is incredible, because it really gives, you know, people the behind the scenes with something like that, Tony.
It does. It was
that people
great.
don't know about. You know, they
Yeah.
hear it, but they don't know all these, you know, session musicians and side musicians until something like that.
And they don't realize, like, I did a project here about 4 or 5 years ago for a fallen officer, and he was a songwriter and his brother was a singer. So I heard about it, and I had known them, you know, through my growing up and everything. We weren't best of friends, but I knew them, you know. So I called them up. I said, man, you know, why don't we do 5 songs, and you come down and sing them, and we'll help your family. So he calls me up. He goes, we don't think Cheryl's going to come down, you know. Or if she does, it'll be Tuesday. I said, no. She has to come down Monday night, because when people hear the finished song on radio, which is 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, whatever the length may be, they hear the song, but they don't see the creation of it. And I said, you've got to bring her down so that she can see her husband's song being created by Nashville musicians.
Right.
You know, and I brought in some of the top guys in Nashville.
Powerful.
And when they hit the first note of that song, the expression that was on their faces was like unbelievable, because they actually saw it coming to life.
Well, and it seems to me too, Tony, from certainly knowing your background and with the new work you're doing and with the podcast and everything else, it seems like you're leading with your heart, and then everything else is kind of, it's like you're a magnet for some of these things.
Well, you know, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I've had people call me up and say, you know, we really like what you're doing. I've got a online TV station over in Northern Ireland, I think, that did a thing on me, and they have sent me a lady that's got a powerful story that's going to be on my podcast, and he told me, he goes, what we really like about what you're doing is that it feels like you're genuinely interested in these people, and they're telling their story, and you're giving some of these people that don't have a voice.
Wow,
So
that's just incredible.
Yeah, it has been, you know, and because this month we put out the one about suicide prevention, and the numbers on that, I mean, I didn't realize it, but the numbers are staggering.
Well, and I didn't realize it either until preparing for your interview, that, you know, how high suicide levels are in autistic people.
Yeah, I mean,
I had no idea. Second
leading cause of death for autistic people. 66% of autistic people have considered suicide.
Oh my God!
I mean, it's a big number. So I had Dr. Rachel Mosley out of London on, and the good thing about her is not only is she a researcher, but she's autistic as well. So she told me her dynamic of how she thought about it, and then how the research went into it, and it's a pretty powerful episode.
I think everything you're doing is powerful right now. And I want to make sure too, Tony, for our viewers, for the podcast, for the music, for Plateau Music, for everything you've got going, where do they need to go for everything Tony Mantor?
Well, they can find me at tonymantor.com, plateaumusic.com. They can find me on all the social media platforms at Tony Mantor. They can find me on all the podcast platforms, Tony Mantor, Why Not Me, The World. I'm pretty available.
Well, I'll tell you what, you won't be for long with the way everything is just exploding for you in all the right ways. New music coming out also with Debbie Campbell, right?
Yes, and we've got a song with Donnie out called New York High, which the interesting part of that song is it's got all the things about New York City, and it was written by a guy in London.
You can't make that up.
No, it's not. It's just so good. So we've released that song over in the UK now, and that should be coming out sometime here in the fall here in the US.
Well, I'll tell you what, you've gone international with everything you're doing, including your great podcast, Why Not Me, The World.
Yes.
And, you can catch up with that podcast and the incredible guests that Tony has on. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, be sure and check this out because it's powerful stuff. And also, you may have suggestions for him on his next guest.
Absolutely.
And I can't wait to hear the new music, everything else you're doing. I'm going to have to come by and check out the studio.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what, Tony Mantor, thank you so much for coming on the show. And be sure to check out his music also, Why Not Me, the podcast, new music coming out with Donnie Most, and also with Debbie Campbell, so many other artists, Plateau Music, you name it, Tony's doing it. Thanks for coming on the show, Tony.
I really appreciate it.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.